today. But as I was mentioning, today's session will be about careers in community-based nonprofits. My name is Juanita Ibarra. I'm the Youth Programs Manager. And I'll hand it over to our co-hosts, Jojo and Miguel, so that they can go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for attending our next Green Career session. And like Juanita said, we're going to be focusing on careers in community-based nonprofits. And we're joined by, sorry if I get your names wrong, but you will introduce yourselves after. We're joined by Safia, Zoe, and Elizabeth. My name is Jojo, and I'll be one of your co-hosts today.
My name is Miguel, and I'll be the other co-host. To start us off, could we briefly introduce ourselves and tell us about our current role in the environment? Could we go with Zoe, Elizabeth, and Safia?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Zoe. I am a waste zero specialist with Recology San Mateo County. I've been with Recology for almost a year. It'll be a year in December, which time flies. We do the outreach and education for our commercial customers and teach people how to properly sort. We are also in charge with the outreach for Senate Bill 1383, which is a mandatory composting law, which requires all residents and businesses to have a compost program. Yeah, Recology isn't a nonprofit, but you know, it's a really great company, and I'm very excited to share my experience.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Didato. I am the wildlife educator at the Peninsula Humane Society and SPCA. So the Peninsula Humane Society and SPCA, it's an animal welfare group. We also have wildlife rescue in addition to domestic. So the Peninsula Humane Society and SPCA has been doing wildlife care for lots of years. This year, we're just opening up. So the scene behind me is actually the scene picture from my window here at our new wildlife care center in Saratoga. So we were able to, we got a foundation to build this much larger facility, because we get thousands of injured wild animals every year. I was really happy because I've done animal care and wildlife care. I've done rehabilitation and science education. So I'm super, super happy to be at this great organization where I get to like teach about what I know and yeah, and talk to people that actually want to hear what's going on out in the wild. So yeah.
Hi everyone, my name is Safia Haidari. I use she, her pronouns. Yeah, thank you for having me today. I work as the program manager for capacity building with the Greenlining Institute. And Greenlining is an organization based in Oakland, but I'm actually based in San Diego. So Greenlining is a racial equity and environmental justice organization. We work towards a future where communities of color can build wealth, live in healthy places filled with opportunity, and are ready to meet the challenges faced by climate change. And we do this through our state and federal policy work, but we also do this through some of our place-based work, which is the team that I'm on. So through capacity building, we have program managers across a couple different areas in California, including Oakland, Stockton, Eastern LA, and San Diego. And the idea is to have these program managers here so that the impacts of the state and federal policy work that we're doing can be felt locally with the communities there. And so, yeah, that's a little bit of background on me and yeah, Greenlining.
Thank you. So for our first question, what inspired you to pursue a career in environmental work? And was there a moment specifically that sparked your passion for that environment?
And right before we dive into the question, if you do have a question and you might think that you will forget, feel free to drop in any questions that you may have for a specific speaker or for all speakers in our chat. We will have Q&A towards the end. Thank you.
Yeah, so
Hi.
we can start with Elizabeth, then Safia, and then Zoe. Let me know if you need me to repeat the question.
I'll ask you to go ahead and repeat the question, please. Yes.
Yeah, so what inspired you to pursue a career in environmental work? And was there a moment that sparked your passion?
So there wasn't any particular moment. I would say there probably was a series of moments. I think that really, so I grew up in the inner city of Chicago, and I didn't really have any exposure to nature. Didn't really have any environmental awareness until a little bit later. And when I did get some of that, and after my first few years in college, I realized how much had been missing when I was growing up. And I was like, you know what, this is something that I really want to get involved with. So, but in terms of like, there are little moments. So I grew up in the inner city. I really didn't have, I never learned to climb a tree. But I had lots of little moments because even though my mom was a single mom, you know, I lived with different family members, but she always gave all of us lots of little opportunities to explore the world in different ways. So I went to summer camp. She took us to museums and to the planetarium. And I really loved doing summer camp. So I remember the first time a summer camp that I went to when I was in high school was in Virginia. So I flew from Chicago to Virginia. And when I was coming in, you know, the Midwest is relatively flat. And when I was coming into Virginia, it was the first time I ever saw mountains. It was the first time that I had seen like these huge expanses of trees. And it was just, I was like, wow. It was amazing. I cannot overstate how amazing that was. When my first year of college, I had not gotten into environmental stuff, but I was doing an observation for a science class, and it was just like an observation. And I sat on the side of a dock, and I just watched some jellyfish, and I drew the jellyfish, and it was just, again, this world that I didn't know anything about. And I didn't realize how amazing it was until I sat down and did that. And so all these little things just sort of really added up. I was always really interested in like dogs and cats. But when I did go into an environmental studies program at Sonoma State, I had the opportunity to do some volunteering, and it wasn't something that I was interested in doing at the time. But when I started working with some wild birds as a student, I was like, this, you know, this is it. This is what I should be doing, taking care of wild animals and helping them survive. So, and all of that stuff and taking conservation biology classes, once you've taken them and really start to understand it, and I'm sure a lot of you younger folks actually have a lot more awareness than I did when I was much older than you. But once you know it, you can't unknow it, right? You can't unsee it. And once you know that there are issues to address, it's really hard to back away. So that's kind of was my long path to becoming involved in environmental work.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe next was Safia.
Yeah, I think for me it was also sort of like a series of moments, but I do remember after college I did this policy internship in City Heights, which is like a neighborhood in San Diego, like a neighborhood that is considered low income and is also like very diverse and also is sort of surrounded by highways. And I learned a lot about sort of the history of that neighborhood, in particular, like relative to the highway construction in that neighborhood, and then like the history of sort of zoning practices and discriminatory policies, and how like people of color, communities of color were really adversely impacted by a lot of the decisions made at the government level, and how that would translate into like health outcomes for these communities, including, you know, cancer and higher asthma rates and things like that. And then, yeah, I kind of started to, maybe that was sort of a transformative experience. I started to see sort of like the impacts of policy as sort of like health outcomes and things that affect people's quality of life. And that neighborhood I really loved also just because I felt like it was such a resilient neighborhood. I thought the diversity was really beautiful too. It was primarily made of Latinx, Vietnamese, and Somali immigrants and refugees. And, you know, I think I saw them all sort of band together to voice their concerns about what was going on in their neighborhoods. And I also really loved the sort of like intergenerational resilience that I saw there too. So it was like a range from young people to parents to, you know, like grandparents that were really really passionate about improving the quality of life for their community. And then one of the campaigns that I saw people get to work on and be really passionate about was the free transit passes for youth. So that was a really diverse coalition as well. And yeah, they were thinking about it kind of in practical terms and that like this would be a great way for young people to sort of be able to get around and navigate the city, but also kind of do a lot to lower the carbon emissions in our neighborhood and, you know, reduce the cancer and asthma clusters as a result.
Yeah, thank you. I believe Zoe, you're next.
All right. Yeah, so I think, you know, like Elizabeth and Safia, I had a lot of little moments. I grew up spending a lot of time outside and in nature. And I think just with, you know, going to summer camps and just having that exposure, especially to like our local, you know, like forests, you know, I live on the peninsula. And so, you know, Portola Redwoods, Huddart Park, those are all really great places. And I think that really sparked my love of nature. And I also spent a lot of time around water. I love the ocean and spend a lot of time in the ocean. And so I think in turn that has really motivated me to want to protect it and to, you know, help fight against climate change as well as, you know, the waste and like just like the amount of waste that we accumulate. And so I think, yeah, I think that really like sparked my passion for a career in environmental work. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's all really like really nice how you all recognize the need and act on it depending on what you want to do or what you're exposed to.
Yeah, I also appreciate how everyone highlighted like awareness and the diversity that comes with this job. For our following question is, what challenges did you face when starting your career, and how did you overcome them? Could we go with Safia, Zoe, and Elizabeth?
Yeah, in terms of challenges, I think it was just difficult for me. So I studied social science when I was in college, and I think initially I wanted to go into teaching, but I just wasn't sure. I don't feel like I had enough sort of like experience in the workforce to really know that that's what I wanted to commit to. Um, and additionally, when I was trying to like find a career, I was really thinking more about sort of maybe what potential employers would want to hear or what might look good on a resume rather than kind of thinking about like what it is that I wanted to get out of that experience. And then really like also just being able to kind of speak authentically about yeah, like maybe what my values are, what I'm seeking in a job opportunity. Um, so yeah, and I think that's really common too when you're first entering the workforce. These are sort of thoughts and insecurities that you're grappling with. Um, I would say the way that I was able to overcome them, I mentioned that I was able to like do this policy internship, and I think that really transformed my view of what a career can be, I learned a lot about community organizing and the importance of like organizing and empowering communities to sort of like understand the community, like where they're at and what policies are being, what policies they're impacted by and sort of like what it is that's shaping their neighborhood. And then making sure that they also feel empowered to kind of speak up and share their concerns and their voices. And it really taught me to really value people's lived experiences, including my own, which I don't think I valued before. I think through that I also felt comfortable kind of talking about, my own experiences with various systems. I also grew up in a low-income neighborhood. My parents were refugees from Afghanistan. So yeah, I would say we had a lot of adverse experiences just socioeconomically. And I always didn't feel like that was something to share, but I kind of learned by hearing other people's stories that it was sort of some of the things that we struggled with were faults of the systems at play and not necessarily our own shortcomings. So yeah, I think that was really powerful. Prior to working at Greenlining, I also worked at this youth advocacy organization called Youth Will. And we had a really unique model of leadership in that we had young people sort of leading the work. Instead of, an executive director and like staff, we had youth and young adults leading all of the work. And I think that youth to youth, like mentorship, peer mentorship is really important. Of course, like finding a mentor that's like further ahead in their career and can guide you is really important. But I think it's also really valuable to make sure that you are in community with people that are, struggling with some of the same things and can help kind of talk you through how it is that they addressed it. And I also think like it's important to give space, to give voice to, I also think it's important to kind of recognize that you might not be alone in your experience. So yeah, that's the answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next is Zoe.
All right. Yeah, so when I started, school, I went to community college and I was originally intending to be a nutrition major and, go kind of more into pre-med and pre-nursing. And so when I wanted to transfer to, a four-year university, I had to change my major in order to be accepted because I didn't meet all of the criteria. And so I kind of fell into this field. And so I think that was a big, I guess, like challenge in the beginning of my career because I, wasn't really familiar with the environmental field. I love nature and I love spending time outdoors, but I really didn't know a lot about what exactly a career would look like in the environmental field. And so at university or UC Santa Cruz, where I went to school, they had a class that was like a mentorship class. And so it was really cool to hear people who had graduated from UCSC or got their master's degree were able to share their experience. And so it was really cool to see all the different, paths that are out there for the environmental field. So I think, one way that I was able to overcome the challenge of not really knowing what a career would look like in the environmental field was trying to get as much exposure as I can. And, something like this where, there's other professionals in the environmental field sharing their experience and sharing, things that they went through. I think that was really, really helpful for me. I'm still definitely at the beginning of my career. I graduated just last year. So I think the biggest thing too that comes with, not really being really new is imposter syndrome. And I think my colleagues who are also around the same age that I am have definitely experienced that. And I think finding a mentor or finding people within your organization to, help you out or for you to ask questions, I think that's something that's been really helpful for me. And even if you, aren't totally sure what you want to do within the environmental field, asking questions, if you meet somebody at an event like this, sending them an email or connecting with them on LinkedIn and asking them questions. I know I definitely did a couple of like informational interviews after I graduated school and was kind of looking for a job, just to hear people's experience and, see what they did. And I think that was really, really helpful in, starting your career. Yeah.
Thank you. For our next speaker, it would be Elizabeth.
Yeah, so when I was studying environmental studies, one thing that I did see was there were a lot of opportunities when I was in college to do all sorts of different jobs, but none of them paid very much. And I think that that's kind of a common experience, is that we want to do important work on small scales, like at local nonprofits as much as possible. But at the same time, we have to be able to support ourselves. And that was certainly true for me when I was a student. There were lots of great, interesting stuff that were projects or unpaid internships that involved travel. And I really did let myself sort of get bogged down in household responsibilities and money and not knowing. And that was really hard, but it was also true. But it really did keep me from really exploring, pursuing some of the passion projects that I thought that would be really fantastic. And really what I found that being flexible was really, for me, the key to overcoming these things. So I was able over time, because I worked when I was in school, I worked worked a lot more than I went to school. But I was able to find work that maybe was not 100% what I wanted in terms of being in the environmental field. But it gave me more skills and experience. So maybe it wasn't exactly the kind of organization that I wanted to be at. But I was able to sort of build experiences. I was able to network some and cultivate relationships. I spent as much time as possible when I was on campus really getting to know other students, but also my professors, and really just doing as much networking as possible. And later on, it was super, super helpful because those were the same folks, even 5-6 years later, who I could go back to and ask for a letter of recommendation. And so just that, all those little steps, maybe doing stuff that maybe is not what you want to do, could help get you to the next step. At least that's what I found.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. I like how basically everyone just kind of highlighted like talking to others and also to having a network of people is really important. So yeah. For our next question, how can we actively integrate and embrace the traditions and practices of BIPOC communities into our environmental efforts? So for the order, we can go with Zoe, Elizabeth, and Safia.
Okay. So I think, part of, like a lot of like our traditions from, like previous generations was using the things that we already have and repairing things instead of buying them new, reusing things as many times as you can. And that's, been like a big part or a big tradition for a really long time, like using reusable things, using glass instead of plastic. And I think with the lens from like working in the waste industry, I think going back to those traditions of learning how to repair and like, learning from the previous generations how to, repair clothing and, learning how to fix a bike or fix your car or kind of making things last for as long as possible. I think that's kind of a tradition that we have fallen away from. And I think it's something that's really important that we kind of go back to, just because with how easy it is to get things off of Amazon or order things online and buying new things instead of repairing the things that we have or reusing things that we already have, like glass jars or like plastic tubs or whatever it may be. Reusing things and repairing things is something that's, I think, really important to continue on and, you know, have passed down from generation to generation. And I think that really would impact, you know, the waste issue that, you know, we're seeing today.
Yeah, thank you. Elizabeth?
So I found this to be a kind of a hard question. I guess because I was like, well, there's so many different communities that have different traditions. But when I thought about it more in terms of what I do and specifically my values in my career, I was thinking about how, you know, ecology, which is what I generally work in, is all about connections and interdependencies. And I feel like in most BIPOC communities, people, families work together to sustain cultures, but also for economic success, especially for immigrant families, but also it's just a little harder, it seems like, in a lot of BIPOC communities. And that's at least my lived experience, was that was part of why our family was so interconnected. And I feel like that's kind of what I do in my job. And it's no different from when I was a child growing up in my family. I feel like there are, even though I didn't have a lot of exposure to environmental practices when I was younger, as over time, my family has evolved, the community has evolved, and I feel like it's really pretty easy for if when we take a step back, for groups that have been marginalized to really appreciate the need for everybody to be recognized. And I think it's super important, and it can be really uncomfortable. At least it has been for me, really uncomfortable as a person of color to really step forward and take up some space in room in a community. But I think that it's something that we do really well in terms of communal care. And so going back to communal care, you know, it's super important that not only in our practices, but also building knowledge. So kind of following up on what Zoe was saying in terms of like passing down ways of being, ways of living in the world that are far more sustainable. But also in my case, like really recognizing that all the smaller components are important to make the whole function. And that's community if you're looking at an ecological scale or on a sociological scale.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a very, very heavy question, and I will not like presume to know the answer to it, but I think I will mention, like, I think it's always important to know like which you know, whose land you're on. So I mentioned that I'm in San Diego, which is also occupied Kumeyaay land. And have noticed that, you know, a lot of the environmental sort of conferences and spaces that I go to do some sort of land acknowledgement to kind of pay respect to you know, the indigenous tribes that we're residing on. Additionally, I know that in some places in California, like I know you can do this in Oakland, there are some places that do land taxes. So if you're visiting a place, for example, you can pay a tax, and that money from the visiting person will go towards like the indigenous tribe there. Yeah, I guess I can also share maybe some of the things that I've been inspired by. There have been a lot of sort of land back initiatives that I've been reading about, that have sort of been tied to the community land trust model, which if you don't know about what community land trusts are, it's essentially sort of like when a community is able to purchase like a large plot of land, and then sort of develop it to reflect the needs and the wants of that community. So for example, like you could purchase a plot of land and then turn that into usually some combination of like housing, as well as commercial real estate, or a community center. But essentially all of that is sort of designed by the community that purchases it, right? And that's usually defined by like what the needs are. So that can be tailored to really reflect like the unique and diverse cultural needs of whoever happens to be there. And I think another thing I will mention, I've been seeing this in some places in San Diego where there are community gardens available. They really, I've seen some excuse me, I've seen some farmers who come from immigrant refugee backgrounds that have been able to sort of leverage the knowledge that they had from farming from their indigenous homelands here in service of that community garden there. And I think that's like another beautiful example.
Yeah, thank you. I think, like taking initiative and carrying things on and always like reflecting on the past generations and also recognizing everyone that's been putting in the work is really important and a really great answer to the question.
Yeah, thank you. For our following question, what advice would you give to young people interested in following a similar path? For the order, could it go Elizabeth, Safia, and Zoe?
Sure. So in terms of advice, I would say number one, volunteer. Volunteer, spend time at different organizations so that you can explore what some different opportunities are, different job paths are before deciding on one. And that also gives you an opportunity not just to learn skills, to network, but also sort of to make some mistakes because we all make mistakes. And as we get older and get into career fields, it's less mistakes that we make when we're younger tend to be a little bit less important than later on. So we can really like make some of those mistakes in different places. When we're in school, especially going through college, take the hard and scary math and science classes. Just do it. I did not. And I thought, what's the difference between a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Science? And I just didn't want to face up to the math that was particularly challenging to me. And that was really the difference for me between being able to get, or that made it harder for me to get some of the more technical jobs. So take the time, take all the hard science and math classes that will get you closer to getting the environmental world is just so much more reliant over time on data and metadata and being able to really analyze it. So just do it. It's going to serve you later. Don't overlook opportunities that seem unrelated. So being curious is really a good thing. Travel. If you have an opportunity to travel, for especially for work or for pleasure, like go places, learn about different places. That'll just, just expand your world and take risks. So if there's something that you're not sure if you're ready for, you're qualified for, do your best and apply for it. Have somebody help you get ready for an interview, but take risks. If there's something that like I can't do that, I'm not ready for it, but I'd really like to, try it. Because that's how we get, and you will surprise yourself with how much you're really ready for and how much you're able to take on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Our next speaker would be Safia.
Yeah, I think I echo all of that. I would also just say, don't be afraid to put yourself out there. I think that I remember when I was younger, kind of starting off, I just really didn't know necessarily like what I wanted to do. And the only way to really figure that out is to have all of these different varying experiences, even if you think that it might not be something that would align with what you want. I would say just go for it because you never know what you'll learn about either that career path or, just about yourself and like what it is that you enjoyed or didn't enjoy. And I think, yeah, throughout all of these experiences, definitely take stock of like what it is that sits right with you and what it is that you didn't like. I think learning about yourself is a really important part of the journey. I would also say that, yeah, I guess just going back to what I was saying earlier, definitely don't doubt your own lived experience. I think that will provide a lot of value in any sort of field that you decide to pursue. And I would also just mention that, the environmental field is so broad, and it can touch on so many different things. It ranges from like youth programming to policy advocacy to, private small businesses to housing to like, there's just so many different intersections. So yeah, don't be afraid to explore all of them or whatever you think might be the one that leads you to your potential career path.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth and Safia said a lot of the things that I was going to say, and I completely want to echo and agree with what they were saying. Just, I think a lot of us don't give ourselves enough credit. And I think we are all very capable. And so even if you don't think you're qualified for something, try anyway. And, like, especially with like internships and job opportunities, like I remember applying for jobs and being like, oh, I'm not qualified for this. But like, in speaking with like, my mom or like some of my friends, they're like, just do it anyway. Like what's the worst they can say? The worst thing that, an employer or whoever could say is no. And, I think we are all capable, and, you can always surprise yourself with what you can do. I think, at my school, they offered a lot of, they were usually unpaid, but a lot of internships and experience working in labs. And that was something that was really helpful for me to kind of get my foot in the door, and just learn more about the environmental industry. And, it was, I went once a week and it was really great. And that was really great work experience. And so just putting yourself out there, being comfortable, being uncomfortable is something that's super important, especially for when you're first starting out, just putting yourself out there, and be true to yourself. I think oftentimes like in interviews, you get worried like, oh, I don't know if I have like the technical experience, but a lot of the times employers are looking for somebody who's willing to learn and is eager and excited. And I think in my experience, that has served me really well. Just, being like, I'm willing to learn, and, I want to try to I'll do the best that I can. And I think that's served me really well. And I think to also echo what Elizabeth said, take the hard math classes, take the hard science classes. Again, you're so much more capable than you think you are. And even if it's intimidating, there are always resources there to help you out. And yeah, and you can always find community in your school or your classes. I know I definitely did. There were definitely a couple of classes that I took that I was like, I don't know anything, but I was able to find a cool community. And yeah.
Thank you for sharing all your insider secrets and information.
Yeah, very valuable advice that I think everyone should really listen to. So just for time, we're gonna have to unfortunately skip our last question, and we're gonna be opening it up to our audience actually, if anyone has any questions they'd like to ask. So we have, what do you think are the most impactful ways individuals can contribute to the environment? I don't know if you have any takers or if you guys wanted to just give you an order. Yeah, Elizabeth?
Feel like the best thing, the biggest impact that we can have really is to communicate on a day-to-day basis about what our intentions are and how we're living our lives. So for example, I have a friend maybe that doesn't necessarily see the value in recycling, and really just like being I think that if everybody who knew that it was important not to put something in the trash, actually just said, hey, this is why it's important, then it would really snowball. So I really think just being vocal and being clear about our intentionality around our behaviors really, really make a difference.
Yeah, thank you.
I think to add to that, if I could add, I want to say, I think, we're all in this together. And I think, everyday actions do add up over time, especially if we're all doing them together. I mean, if you ever get the chance to go to the Shoreway Environmental Center and just look at the huge mountain of garbage and the huge mountain of, compost and, I think making sure that you're doing your part, but also educating yourself. Like I was able to go to a landfill and a compost facility on Monday, and just all the plastic that was in the compost, it was like, oh dang, like that's a really big missed opportunity. And so just making sure that you're well versed in local resources, and you know doing the best that you can, and also helping educate others, I think is really important.
Yeah, thank you. Safia, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add, or we could move on to our next question.
Yeah, I guess I would just say, not directly answering the question, but I think the greatest impact we can have is all done in a collective, right? So, yeah, I do feel like an important first step in that is kind of just being acclimated with, the environment that you're in and what the needs are there, and what like sort of environmental environmental detriments or hazards there are, and how you could maybe start working to address those, or maybe joining a group that is already doing the work and doing that. And yeah, educating yourself and others around you as well.
Yeah, thank you. So we have another question from someone.
Yeah, I'll read it. The question is, are there any challenges that you face in your jobs? Someone said something about acknowledging the indigenous people who already occupy the land. What if they are against any of your environmental efforts? Do you still act on it?
I can start off with this. I guess the first part of this question I can have more of an answer for, but I think in the environmental industry, I think sometimes, unfortunately, there is a lot of pushback sometimes, especially because like a lot of environmental issues are politicized. And I think specifically in my role, with Senate Bill 1383, the mandatory composting law, a lot of people don't want to start compost. And, I think a lot of people either don't understand what it is or why it's important. But some people are just really against it and are really mean about it, to be quite honest. But I think just trying to explain the best that you can, like why it's important. And, with the organic material that's being diverted away from the landfill, there's less methane being produced in landfills. And, I think, again, trying to educate them, I think that really helps sometimes, because some people are more understanding. But yeah, sometimes you do get pushback, and that can be difficult. But I think, again, just trying to stay positive and just keep going, and just, not everybody is like that. So I think just take it in stride.
Yeah, maybe positivity is really important. I was wondering if anyone else had anything to add on.
Yeah, I think I agree that, sometimes the environmental field is very politicized, and that can be kind of a struggle in itself especially when you're trying to like pass policies. But I would say the main way that we challenge that is to kind of just come back to the basic fact that we all really do want the same things. We all want a safe place to live. We all want clean water to drink, and, a safe place for our families to live in, and grow up in. safe air to breathe. And so that's sort of our way of depoliticizing it and really making sure that whoever we're speaking to is not taking our work and our actions in bad faith. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't, but that's our approach. And then, yeah, I think this other question about like acknowledging Indigenous people and what if, they're against environmental efforts. I think this goes back to what I was saying about how, the environmental field is so broad and, there are multiple, I think there's just multiple, I guess, perspectives on a question like that. But I would say, at least with greenlining, we always do try to like respect the sovereignty of Indigenous people. And so if a situation like that occurs, we would definitely, of course, try to work with them and see, what it is that is being opposed, because there's probably good reason for that.
Yeah, thank you. So Elizabeth already answered, which is awesome. We were asked, was there another career that you wanted to pursue besides the one you have?
Yeah, I really wanted to be out in the field, traveling and actually like being out with wildlife, and doing a lot of the research and GPS tracking and taking samples and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I had mentioned that I was, pre-med, pre-nursing. So I did want to do that, but I think I also was really interested in doing more field work and, getting samples. And I was really interested in water quality. Oop, I think I froze. But I was really interested in water quality monitoring. That was something that I found really interesting and I still find really interesting. So I think if I ever had the opportunity to do something like that, or testing things, I think that would be really cool, because I really do love the science part of environmentalism.
Yeah, I think I mentioned I wanted to be a teacher, or I was thinking about going into teaching, specifically like high school. And I think for me, I just felt like, I feel like that's such an important age, and like such an age where I feel like a lot of teachers can fall short in sort of helping to activate and really like empower that age group. But I just wasn't certain about if that's exactly what I wanted to commit to. But I feel like I was fortunate in that I kind of got to be able to do that work through youth organizing, which I did later in my career. And still sort of sometimes overlaps with my work at greenlining. Not as often as I wish it did, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
We have another question. With all the knowledge you have now, what would you have done differently to achieve your career goals?
Yeah, many takers.
I think I would say I think my career goals are ever evolving. So yeah, maybe I think that's also an important thing to know, is that it's okay to like change your goals and your perspectives with the more things that you learn as you go on further in your career. I don't know that I would have done anything differently, because I feel like I needed all of those experiences to get to where I am. Yeah, like I think with my job, it's not like for almost everyone at my organization, I would say like it wasn't like a direct sort of clear career pathway. They worked in one field and realized that, they could expand their knowledge coming to this other organization. So yeah, that's all to say, yeah, I don't think I would change anything.
I think I would have believed in myself more and pushed myself a little more. That's pretty much it. I would have tried to do those hard things, like I mentioned before, with taking the classes that were a little scary at the time, sending out the applications for that job that I was super excited about, even though I wasn't sure if I had the qualifications. So really taking more chances and being more positive about my future. So that's why I'm always telling people to like really believe in yourself, even if you're not sure, even if you don't really believe in yourself, you know, act as if, because that'll take you a long way.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. If I could add,
Yeah.
I would also say I think I don't think I would have done anything differently, because I think again, as Safia was saying, you know, everything that I did learn along the way, I think was an important lesson that I needed to learn. That being said, I will say I think, you know, take the extra classes. I think college is a great opportunity to expand your knowledge and learn different skills. And I think there are times where I wish that I had done more, or like learned a little bit more about certain topics, just because I had the access to it then and I don't now. Well, I mean, you can always go back to school and there's always ways to learn more, but yeah, I think again, learn as much as you can.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next question is, someone asked, is what's the best thing about your job? I know Elizabeth already answered. Loves seeing kids excited.
I love how multifaceted my job is. I think something that, you know, it's really cool that we get to do with outreach and education, but there is also, we part of Senate Bill 1383 are doing route reviews, and so we go out into the field and look in people's garbage and go dumpster diving. But it's so cool to be able to, see like, okay, like what's a common contaminant? Like what is it that, like, maybe we need to be stronger about this messaging. And maybe not so strong, or like maybe like we're okay on talking about like bioplastics, but maybe we need to talk about plastic bags in the recycle, or things like that. I think that part's really cool. And I also think seeing improvement, I mean, something that I think is really cool is that Ox Mountain landfill was scheduled to be closed in, I think it was 2036, but with all of the outreach that not only Recology San Mateo County, but the other local waste haulers have done, the life of the landfills was extended to 2040, which is super cool. So that's something that's really rewarding. And I think it's been a really rewarding job, and seeing people's contamination improving, and things getting recycled because they're not contaminated, or yeah, I think that's been pretty cool. And all the presentations, and yeah, talking to kids, and yeah.
I think the coolest part about my job is just all of the community partners that we get to work with across the state, and just hearing kind of all of the amazing work that they're doing and how we can be like a supporting factor in that. In San Diego, we have 6 community partners, and we provided sort of pass-through funding for them to be able to secure larger sources of funding, which is all like really technical, but we're able to do like occasional site visits with them, and really see like where that money is going to, and how they're investing it and how they're really using it to define what climate justice looks like for their neighborhoods, and really kind of see like the level of sort of sovereignty and autonomy that these neighborhoods feel as a result of all of that. And so, yeah, that's really cool and empowering.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe our last question would be, any advice on how to develop connections with peers and mentors, especially after graduation? Like that. Could be anyone.
I think it's super important to check in with folks. And really that can be as big as small as an email saying to a coworker or a professor, hey, this is where I'm at, I got this job, or I just left this job and I'm thinking about going back to school, and just really, really cultivating conversation. finding out if there are ways to contribute, going back, being a speaker in a class, something like that, but just finding reasons to just connect, and letting people know where you are as things change.
Yeah. So thank you everyone for all your amazing responses and for all the valuable work that you do. And we are at time. And so yeah, just thank you all for your time and for being here and for answering our questions. So just a reminder for next week, we'll be back here on our third session, same time, 5:30. So yeah, thank you everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.